Welcome to Metrics That Matter. We will learn how to make sense of your fundraising data to make better decisions and raise more money with less effort. Brought to you by fundraisingreportcard.com, the simple and free analytics and reporting tool for nonprofit pros. Now measuring is easier than ever with fundraisingreportcard.com.
Aren't you glad we're not in a lawsuit right now?
Yeah, when you phrase it that way, Tim, I am incredibly pleased that no one is suing me right now. Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, anyone suing you?
No. I've never
feels good,
had to go through that before. It's great.
Yeah. I feel like if you are being sued or if you're suing someone, which one's worse, getting sued or suing someone? What do you think? There's pros and cons to both.
Like if you're suing someone, I guess it depends on the motivation and if it's like you're just being some kind of petty or if it's like a legitimate thing. And I feel like there's a lot of illegitimate lawsuits out there.
Yeah.
There's some good ones that are worth pursuing.
You know, we could be onto something here. Instead of the Metrics That Matter podcasts, talking about fundraising and things like that, let's just remake Judge Judy. But,
sure.
You know,
we could evaluate lawsuits if the person has a good motive and heart behind them,
And to make this somewhat topical and relevant, that's actually what we are going to do today, is evaluate an ongoing lawsuit. And before you press pause or open a new tab or close out your window, this is relevant. This is involving the University of Chicago and the Pearson Members Family Foundation and a $100 million charitable bequest gone wrong.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time that this has happened. So
we're kind of going to evaluate, should you accept every big major donation you get? And, what does that mean for your organization? Does that donor get to dictate to you what your mission really is?
This becomes a pretty
heavy episode.
A heavy conversation. So to give a little bit of background, the Pearson Family Members Foundation has this initiative. They're an incredibly wealthy family. I think they made their money in coal or oil, or just something. They made a lot of money. Enough money that all the family members now are on the board of their family foundation. And their objective is through their Pearson Institute to find resolutions to global conflicts and educate future leaders to bring resolution to global conflicts. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And they're an incredibly well-endowed, thanks to their family members, and well-respected family foundation. This is not, someone down the street that has maybe, might be considered a major donor in your community. This is a multi-$100 million organization, institution. So this family and their family foundation, a few years back, I forget the exact
2015.
It was in 2015. Okay. So the Pearson Family Members Foundation decided that they wanted to make a pretty large investment into their institute, into building and developing these leaders. So they started going through a process of researching institutions that they could donate to build out that institution.
Yeah.
And the Pearson family ultimately ended up deciding on the University of Chicago. Literally no one in their family has attended the University of Chicago.
Okay. So it wasn't like some kind of personal affinity with that school.
We think that this is the best recipient who will take our investment and run with it the furthest. There's even an article from the Chicago Tribune that quotes one of the family members as saying, they had the greatest academic rigor and one of the strongest reputations. We felt, safe and comfortable making this investment with them. So they invested this $100 million contribution.
Yep. Came with a 60-page book to go along with it.
Exactly.
Kind of a manual.
Exactly.
Instructions of use.
So the foundation, in this incredibly complex charitable gift, included a 60 or 65-page, definitely more than your normal, documentation and legalese for how that money would A, be dispersed, so when the university would receive it, and B, how it could be spent. And it got incredibly specific.
And
incredibly
something
specific.
I just want to bring up at the front here is you may, at the very beginning of a project, think X thing will cost X amount of money, but hey, that building, you may think it's $100 million when it's actually $200 million.
Well, and you bring up a good point of almost the how much research can you do in advance and specifications can you outline, and then when you're actually in the moment of buying the building or,
Yeah.
in their case, hiring a director for the Institute, things like that. What we budgeted actually be used for what we needed. And that's sort of at the crux of what's happened here is there were all these specifications outlined. We need office space of this certain level, Class A, and we need a director by this certain date at this salary level. Those specifications are great because they help provide direction, but they're also a little bit of a handcuff in the sense of what you're trying to describe, Tim, which is, what if it costs more? What if it costs less? Do I still have to pay the director $250,000? Like,
Right.
What if the going rate's $220? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Tom Pearson, who's kind of like the chairman of the Family Foundation, and the family came up with this 60-page document, which you could imagine took them an incredibly long time to write and draft with their lawyers and all that jazz. And it laid out specifications as detailed as salaries, office space, etc. For the next, I forget exactly how long the giving cycle was, but they were paying in increments.
Okay.
They were releasing the contributions in increments, and it was like $13 million at a time to the University of Chicago for them to invest.
Okay.
Now, what happened was kind of twofold. One is the Family Foundation identified that the University of Chicago hadn't hired this director by the date specified in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the University of Chicago
Was the office space ready for that director to even have a place to go? Are they just be working in the park on the bench there? Or?
I do not know, but I imagine in this really well-prepared document that they would have had the office space before the hiring of the director. So the Family Foundation decided to sue to get the money back that they had already given, which was around $10 or $13 million, and then to void the rest of the contract. So the other $90 million that were to be donated. Now, the University of Chicago has raised that the contract was actually breached when the Family Foundation didn't remit payment on the next $13 million payment for the gift. Mm-hmm. So there's now this legal fight between the Pearson Family Foundation and the University of Chicago. One saying you didn't hire a director soon enough, give us our $100 million back. Yeah. The other saying, well, you didn't give us the $13 million, the second installment, that was the word I was looking for, the second installment of your gift to facilitate us doing it, so the contract was actually breached. Okay, big picture here is this is going to cost both the Family Foundation and the school, well, and more poignantly, whoever loses, tens of millions of dollars. Yeah. Tens of millions of dollars. There was a case recently, I think it was back in 2007 or 2008. It was at Princeton University, and it was another family foundation, and they had made a charitable contribution, a part of the endowment back in like the 1960s, and it was very specific. The funds had to go towards, I think it was creating coaching and academically supporting scholars who would go on to have government jobs. Like, it was really specific.
Okay.
And like the grandchildren of the family that made this contribution to the endowment, and that has grown over time at Princeton, realized that some of the money wasn't going to help just place people in the government. It was helping to place people in like private sector positions. And they sued. Wow. And it ended up costing Princeton over $70 million just to go through the legalese and the legal back and
amazing.
Forth. It's ridiculous, man. Yeah, there's a New York Times article about it. And it was in 2008. I just pulled it up here on my screen. Let's definitely put that in the show notes because it's just wild to read about.
And how do you go through that process of saying, yes, we will do this and stand by that, or say no to a bunch of money?
So that then becomes the crux of our conversation, which is, okay, this circumstance, what has happened at the University of Chicago is unfortunate. And it's unfortunate for many reasons. And my immediate personal connection to this or thought was, well, the Pearson Family Foundation is kind of out of line. Why didn't you trust the organization with your money? Like, they would have done the right thing. Why are you suing them? I immediately started to blame the donor. Mm-hmm. And then I talked about this with a family friend who happens to be a major donor, not on the Pearson level scale.
Sure.
Way away from that type of contribution. And I had a conversation with her. And she started to express to me, this funder, this organization, the Family Foundation, outlined their plan, exactly what they wanted to have happen. And the university, the institution, couldn't make that happen. That is such a poor reflection for the university for future major donors.
Mismanagement of funds.
Exactly.
It's they didn't want what happened to, was it Mark Zuckerberg that gave like $100 million to some school and they just didn't know what to do with it?
He probably has.
Yeah, like it was his original philanthropic attempt just failed utterly because there wasn't the direction behind it.
And in this case, there was so much direction.
Yeah.
So this major donor was saying, you're breaking down the ability to trust the nonprofit to execute on my vision. I'm the funder. I have a vision. Go execute.
And that vision aligned with the university.
Enough for them to accept the contribution. Yep. That sentiment where, no, we really shouldn't be bashing Tom Pearson and his, multi-million-dollar family foundation. She actually said to me, we should be applauding them for putting as much effort and work in as they did to create this plan.
This episode is brought to you by us here at MarketSmart and the Fundraising Report Card. What is the Fundraising Report Card? Well, it's a free service offered at fundraisingreportcard.com that enhances your fundraising efforts with easy-to-use analytics and charts. Get your proposals approved faster by using these beautiful and elegant charts created automatically with fundraisingreportcard.com. You'll also find a great blog that dives deep into what data means for your organization and how you can use it effectively to make smarter decisions. Start learning and start generating beautiful charts by going to fundraisingreportcard.com. Now back to metrics that matter.
Now, in my mind, $100 million, gift, it seems at this scale that perhaps someone from that foundation, they'd have capacity to have someone be on site working with them side by side, filling out this vision, or is that not the case where you'd not want that?
I don't know if there's legal implications there or a little bit of a breakdown in terms of conflict of interest, I guess is what I'm thinking in my head. My sister, for example, she works at the National Academies of Science, Medicine, and Engineering here in Washington, D.C. Yep. Their funding doesn't come from large family foundations. Sometimes they'll get contributions there. Where a lot of their funding comes from corporate contributions.
Sure.
And for example, she's on the Childhood Obesity Roundtable. Well, when Coca-Cola wants to come in, Coca-Cola is one of their major sponsors.
Okay.
All sorts of food manufacturers are their sponsors. So how do you, at that scale, where these are grants essentially of $10, $15, $20 million, employing people like my sister to do this research, if they wanted to have someone on the ground with them.
Unbiased research.
Exactly. But that's the parallel that it draws for me with what you suggested, Tim, is if the Pearson Family Foundation, their money's from coal. They have this institute to try and bring resolutions to global conflicts. It doesn't seem like that's entirely aligned, but maybe there is some sort of capitalistic connection there. The moment they say, okay, one of our staff is going to be part of your staff now, I don't know. I feel like that might cross a legal boundary or at least an ethical boundary. Because I know in my sister's circumstance at NASM, shout out to NASM.
Yeah, that's very clear. That would be, in that situation, a very big breach of just do you trust the research at that point?
And in this case, the research of the institute or the outcomes of that institute, the people that they're training, is charitable giving in this complex form simply a mechanism to sway the way that youth are educated so that, a family can make even more wealth in the future? These are concerns
very
that
big concerns,
I don't necessarily wake up every day and think about, but there are people out there who are concerned with that. This idea, the fact that the University of Chicago is going to face tens of millions of dollars in legal fees to fight this. The fact that the Pearson Family Foundation, there's pros and cons to the way that they approach this. It's just this incredible dynamic in giving that no one really thinks about as much. We all think about Giving Tuesday, in 2 months. We don't think about these really incredibly complex charitable bequests.
And I wonder what this case was. Did they jump right to a lawsuit or did they have a conversation? Hey, what's going on here? Why aren't we on track?
There was a little bit of reporting from the Chicago Tribune, but not enough to really understand kind of when the breakdown happened.
Yeah.
Well, when the breakdown happened, when the lawsuit was filed, but what preceded that and led up to it. So I wish I had details there.
Yeah,
and there's some reporting even in the Philanthropy News Digest online, but. Yeah. I'm telling you, this dynamic, it's I think the wave of the future as well, because the Chronicle of Philanthropy publishes, it's available online. If you just Google search major private gifts to higher education, they update this page with all contributions. I think it's $10 million and above, or maybe it's $25 million and above to higher education institutions. And there are so many. And the wave of the future, I think, is for more contributions just like this, where small subsets of individuals are accumulating a ton of wealth, and then they give back generally to alma maters, or in the case of the Pearson Family Foundation, to where they see that they could potentially have the most impact.
Sure.
So this type of complex giving isn't going anywhere. It's simply that you don't experience it every year like you experience Giving Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you experience it once every decade. That would be an incredible game-changing instance for your organization.
Right. So how does this relate to you at your nonprofit?
Well, first and foremost, if you get an offer for a $100 million or a $1 million or even a $500,000, whatever, if you get some sort of inclination for a major contribution to your organization, there is a really important step involved before saying yes and jumping up and down.
Yeah,
and
wait to open that champagne bottle.
It's just like us, Tim, here at our office. If a huge mega nonprofit came to us and said, we'd like a $10 million contract with Market Smart, we can't just sign that.
Right.
It would feel great.
It would.
I'd probably go on vacation for a little while at least. But we can't do that.
No.
And it's the same idea at your nonprofit and at any organization. The idea of restricted giving isn't new. The idea of incredibly complex restricted giving and incredibly vision-driven restricted giving, it feels a little bit new age.
Yeah.
So review what that actually entails. Make sure that there's a partnership. I think that's, if there's any takeaway here, what the Pearson Family Foundation was looking for was a partnership more than anything. And when they realized they didn't have that partnership, just like any business would do, they're cutting it off.
Yeah.
So go into, if you're ever in this situation at your organization, give some high fives around the office, get excited about how you're going to further your mission, and then buckle down and review what you're really getting into, and make sure that you have a partnership with that funder or that organization that's funding you. Don't be surprised if individual funding from major donors continues this transition towards almost grant-based funding, where your grantor is going to expect a very detailed report of the outcomes of their grant. Your major donors are going to want similar things, i.e. Pearson Family Foundation. Yeah.
Okay.
So lawsuits, not fun.
No.
But in this case, it's pretty topical for our space.
And you can learn from this. Don't make that mistake. Make sure, building relationships with those people making those major gifts are important. And
building the partnership.
Building a partnership, yeah.
If you get a $100 million gift after listening to this, please let Tim and I know how that happened, and we'll be interested to hear how it goes.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Looking forward to next time.
Sounds good. Bye.